The alarm bells rang across the bridge of the UES Defiant as Captain Jake Morrison stepped out of his ready room. His coffee mug sat forgotten on his desk as he moved quickly to his command chair. The bridge crew was already at their stations, fingers dancing across control panels that glowed with soft blue light. "Report," Morrison called out, settling into his captain's chair. His uniform was crisp and clean, but his face showed the stress of 3 sleepless nights. "Lieutenant Amy." Carter turned from her tactical station. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight bun and her green eyes were sharp with focus. "Long-range sensors are picking up multiple contacts approaching from the outer system. 47 ships in total, sir." Morrison felt his stomach drop. They had known this day would come, but knowing and being ready were 2 different things. "How long until they reach us?" 6 hours at their current speed, Carter replied. She pulled up a holographic display that showed the approaching fleet. The ships looked like floating crystals, their surfaces catching and reflecting light in beautiful patterns. "They're not trying to hide, Captain. They want us to see them coming." Chief Engineer Danny Walsh spoke up from his station near the back of the bridge. His hands were already moving across his controls, checking every system on the ship. "All systems are green, Captain. The reactor is running at full capacity, and the new armor plating is secure." Morrison nodded. The Defiant was humanity's first real warship, built in secret over the past 5 years. While other nations on Earth still argued about space exploration budgets, a small group of military leaders and scientists had seen the writing on the wall. The galaxy was not empty, and not all of its inhabitants would be friendly. "Communications. Any word from Earth Command?" Morrison asked. Ensign Bobby Martinez shook his head. "Nothing yet, sir. We're still operating under radio silence protocols." The captain understood. If this went badly, Earth needed to maintain the illusion that the Defiant was acting alone. It was a cold calculation, but Morrison had volunteered for this mission knowing full well that he and his crew might be sacrificed to buy Earth more time. Commander Pete Johnson entered the bridge from the weapons bay. His face was serious, but Morrison could see the excitement in his eyes. Johnson had spent 2 years designing the Defiant's weapon systems, and he was eager to see if his theories would work in real combat. "Railguns are charged and ready, Captain," Johnson reported. "We have 200 tungsten rounds loaded and ready to fire. The targeting computers are calibrated, and the magnetic coils are running at peak efficiency." Morrison smiled, despite the situation. While the rest of the galaxy had spent centuries perfecting energy weapons and energy shields, humanity had taken a different path. Their weapons were crude by galactic standards, but they had one advantage that no alien civilization had considered. "Good work, Pete. Make sure your teams are ready. We may not get a second chance to make a first impression." Dr. Lisa Grant looked up from her science station. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, and her lab coat was stained with coffee and machine oil. She had been working for 36 hours straight, making final adjustments to the ship's systems. "Captain, I'm reading some interesting energy signatures from the approaching fleet," she said. "Their shields are generating a lot of electromagnetic interference, but it's all in the energy spectrum. I'm not detecting any kinetic barriers." This was the moment Morrison had been waiting for. 3 years ago, when the first alien probe had been detected entering the solar system, humanity's best scientists had worked around the clock to understand the technology. What they had discovered was both encouraging and terrifying. The alien probe had been protected by an energy shield that could deflect any energy-based weapon. Lasers, plasma bolts, particle beams. Nothing could penetrate the barrier. Most civilizations would have assumed this made the aliens invincible. But humanity had a history of finding creative solutions to impossible problems. Dr. Grant and her team had realized that energy shields were designed to stop energy weapons. They had never been tested against simple kinetic projectiles. "Captain," Carter called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the lead alien vessel." Morrison straightened in his chair. "Put it on the main screen." The view screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of an alien ship. The creature that appeared was tall and thin, with translucent skin that seemed to glow from within. Its eyes were large and black, and when it spoke, its voice was translated by the ship's computers into perfect English. Primitive species of the third planet, the alien said, its tone filled with casual contempt. I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire. Your world has been selected for integration into our glorious civilization. You will surrender your weapons and prepare your population for relocation. Morrison exchanged glances with his crew. They had practiced this moment in simulations, but the real thing was different. The aliens' arrogance was breathtaking. It spoke to them as if they were children who should be grateful for the opportunity to serve. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Defiant, he replied calmly. I'm afraid we must respectfully decline your offer. The alien's expression changed, showing what might have been surprise. You do not understand, Primitive One. This is not a negotiation. Our fleet consists of 47 warships, each capable of destroying your pathetic vessel with ease. You have no choice in this matter. Morrison stood up from his chair and walked closer to the view screen. Behind him, his crew continued their preparations, but he could feel their eyes on him. This was the moment that would define not just their mission, but possibly the future of humanity itself. Admiral Kethvar, Morrison said, his voice steady and calm. You're making a mistake. You see us as primitive because our technology is different from yours. But different doesn't always mean inferior. The alien laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Your species has barely managed to leave your own solar system. We have ruled this galaxy for 3,000 of your years. What could you possibly possess that would threaten the might of the Zephyrian Empire? Morrison smiled, and for the first time since the aliens had appeared on their sensors, he felt truly confident. You're about to find out. Admiral Kethvar cut the communication channel and turned to his tactical officer. His crystalline features showed nothing but boredom as he prepared to destroy yet another primitive species that dared to resist the Empire's will. Begin attack. Formation 7, he ordered, his voice echoing through the bridge of his flagship. This will be over quickly. The Zephyrian fleet moved with practiced precision. 47 ships arranged themselves in a perfect sphere around the single human vessel. Each ship was a work of art, their crystal hulls catching the light from the distant star and throwing it back in brilliant rainbows. They had used this formation to crush hundreds of rebellious worlds over the centuries. On the Defiant, Captain Morrison watched the alien ships take their positions. The bridge was quiet except for the steady hum of the ship's systems and the soft beeping of sensor readings. Every member of his crew knew their job, and they were ready. They're surrounding us, Lieutenant Carter reported from her tactical station. Energy readings are off the charts. Those ships are powerful, Captain. Morrison nodded. Dr. Grant, what are you seeing on the science station? Dr. Grant looked up from her displays, her eyes bright with excitement despite the danger they faced. It's just as we thought, Captain. Their shields are pure energy barriers. I'm reading electromagnetic fields that could stop any plasma weapon or laser array. But there's nothing there that would stop a physical projectile. Commander Johnson spoke up from the weapons console. Captain, our railguns are locked and loaded. Targeting computers have solutions on 12 enemy vessels. We're ready to fire on your command. The first alien attack came without warning. Beams of pure energy lanced out from the Zephyrian ships, striking the Defiant's hull with tremendous force. The ship shook under the impact, and sparks flew from several control panels. Hull integrity holding, Chief Engineer Walsh reported, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. The new armor plating is working, Captain. It's absorbing most of the energy. Morrison felt a surge of pride in his crew and their ship. The Defiant's armor was made from a combination of metals that Earth scientists had developed specifically for this mission. While other worlds had focused on energy shields, humanity had built better armor. Damage report, Morrison called out. Minor hull scoring on decks 4 and 5, Walsh replied. No structural damage. The armor is holding up better than we hoped. The alien attacks continued, wave after wave of energy weapons striking the human ship. The Defiant rocked under the assault, but it remained intact. On the view screen, Morrison could see the beautiful light show as the alien weapons discharged their deadly cargo. Admiral Kethvar watched in growing confusion as his fleet's weapons failed to destroy the primitive vessel. The ship's hull was glowing from the heat of the energy impacts, but it was not breaking apart as it should have. "Increase power to all weapons," he ordered. "Focus all fire on their engine section." The intensity of the attack doubled, then tripled, the space around the Defiant filled with deadly energy as the alien fleet poured everything they had into destroying the human ship. But still, it survived. "Sir," Morrison said, turning to his weapons officer, "I think we've seen enough. Show them what we brought to this fight." Johnson's hands moved across his controls with practiced skill. The railguns powered up with a deep humming sound that could be felt through the ship's hull. "Firing solution locked. All guns ready, Captain." "Fire," Morrison ordered. The railguns fired in sequence, their magnetic coils accelerating tungsten projectiles to incredible speeds. There was no flash of light, no visible beam. The rounds were simply there one moment and gone the next, traveling at a significant fraction of light speed toward their targets. The first Zephyrian ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light and debris. The tungsten round had passed through, its energy shield as if it did not exist, punching through the crystal hull and detonating the ship's power core. Admiral Kethvar stared in shock as his ship's sensors tried to make sense of what had just happened. "What kind of weapon was that?" he demanded. "I don't know, sir," his tactical officer replied, his voice shaking with fear. "Our sensors didn't detect any energy discharge. It was as if the ship just exploded on its own." The second railgun fired, and another Zephyrian vessel was destroyed, then the third and the fourth. Each shot was perfectly aimed, each tungsten round finding its target with deadly precision. "Evasive maneuvers," Kethvar screamed, but his ships were too close together. The formation that had been their strength was now their weakness. On the Defiant, the crew worked with calm efficiency. Carter called out targets while Johnson fired the railguns as fast as they could recharge. Dr. Grant monitored the alien fleet's movements, predicting where they would try to go next. "They're trying to break formation," she reported. "But they're having trouble with their own ships getting in the way." Morrison smiled grimly. The aliens had never faced an enemy that could penetrate their shields. Their tactics were based on energy weapon duels, where ships could fire at each other for hours, without significant damage. They had no experience with weapons that could kill with a single shot. "Keep firing," Morrison ordered. "Don't give them time to adapt." The railguns continued their deadly work. Each shot took down another alien ship, their crystal hulls offering no protection against the simple kinetic weapons. The beautiful formation began to collapse as ships tried to escape the killing field. Admiral Kethvar watched in horror as half his fleet was destroyed in the space of 10 minutes. 3,000 years of Zephyrian dominance, and they had never faced anything like this. The primitive humans had found a way to make their advanced shields useless. "All ships, retreat to minimum safe distance," he ordered, his voice barely controlled. "We need to regroup and find a way to counter their weapons." The surviving Zephyrian ships began to pull back, but Morrison was not about to let them escape easily. "Pursue them," he ordered. "Stay in range, but don't let them get comfortable." The Defiant moved forward, its engines pushing it after the retreating alien fleet. The tide of battle had turned completely. What should have been a simple conquest had become a nightmare for the Zephyrian Empire. Dr. Grant looked up from her station, her face showing both excitement and concern. "Captain, I'm picking up communications from the alien fleet. They're trying to call for reinforcements." Morrison nodded. He had expected this. "Can we jam their signals?" "Already on it," replied Ensign Martinez from the communications station. "Their signals are being scrambled. Nothing is getting through to their home worlds." The captain looked out at the stars, knowing that this battle was just the beginning. The aliens would not give up easily, and humanity would need to be ready for what came next. But for now, they had proven that Earth would not go quietly into the night. The Defiant continued its pursuit of the alien fleet, a single human ship chasing the remnants of an empire that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. The message was clear. Humanity had arrived, and they were not impressed by the reputation of their enemies. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with growing fear. 23 of his ships were gone, destroyed by weapons that his science officers could not even identify. The remaining fleet had pulled, back to what they hoped was a safe distance. But the human ship continued to follow them like a predator stalking wounded prey. "Status report," he ordered, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. His tactical officer's hands shook as he worked his controls. "We have 24 ships remaining, sir. All vessels report minor damage from debris, but their main systems are intact. The human ship is maintaining pursuit at 2,000 kilometers distance." Kethvar turned to his science officer, a younger Zephyrian whose crystalline skin had lost its usual glow. "Have you determined how their weapons work?" "Sir, our sensors detect no energy discharge when they fire. There is no plasma bolt, no particle beam, nothing our shields are designed to stop. It appears they are using primitive kinetic projectiles, but at impossible velocities." The Admiral felt his confidence cracking. For 3,000 years, the Zephyrian Empire had conquered world after world using the same basic strategy. Their energy shields made them nearly invulnerable to any weapon the galaxy could produce. Energy weapons were the mark of an advanced civilization. Only the most primitive species still used kinetic weapons, and those were far too slow to be effective in space combat. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "I'm receiving a transmission from the human vessel." "Put it through," Kethvar said, dreading what he might hear. Captain Morrison's face appeared on the main screen, his expression calm and controlled. Behind him, the human bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, showing none of the panic that filled the Zephyrian ships. "Admiral Kethvar," Morrison said, his voice carrying clearly across the void between their vessels, "I believe you wanted to discuss the terms of our surrender." The alien admiral's anger flared, overriding his fear for a moment. "You have destroyed 23 ships, human, but you are still outnumbered. We have reinforcements coming from across the sector. Your victory is temporary." Morrison smiled, and Kethvar found the expression deeply unsettling. "Actually, Admiral, your reinforcements aren't coming. We've been jamming your communications since this battle began. No word of what happened here is reaching your homeworlds." On the Defiance Bridge, Lieutenant Carter monitored the alien fleet's movements while Commander Johnson kept the railguns targeted on the enemy ships. The tactical situation was clear. The aliens were trapped between running away and fighting, and neither option looked good for them. "Captain," Dr. Grant called out from her science station, "I'm detecting changes in their formation. They're trying to spread out, probably to make it harder for us to target multiple ships." Morrison nodded. "Smart move, but it won't help them much. Pete, what's our ammunition status?" Johnson checked his displays. "We've fired 47 rounds, sir. We have 153 tungsten projectiles remaining. More than enough to finish this fight." Chief Engineer Walsh spoke up from his station. "Captain, the railguns are running hot. We can keep firing, but we should let them cool down soon or risk damage to the magnetic coils." This was the moment Morrison had been waiting for. The aliens were adapting to their tactics, just as he had expected they would. But humanity had learned something over centuries of warfare that the Zephyrians had forgotten during their long dominance. The best weapon was often the one your enemy didn't expect. "All stop," Morrison ordered. "Hold position and power down the railguns." The Defiant came to a halt in space, its engines going silent. On the alien ships, confusion spread as they tried to understand why the human vessel had stopped its pursuit. Admiral Kethvar stared at the tactical display. "What are they doing? Why have they stopped?" His tactical officer was equally puzzled. "Unknown, sir. Their weapon systems appear to be powering down. Perhaps their primitive technology has failed?" The Admiral felt a spark of hope. Maybe the humans had reached the limit of their capabilities. Maybe their strange weapons had broken down under the stress of combat. "All ships reform attack formation," he ordered. "We attack together, concentrate our fire on their weapon systems." The Zephyrian fleet began to move back toward the Defiant, their confidence slowly returning. If the human weapons were disabled, they could use their superior numbers to overwhelm the single enemy ship. On the human bridge, Morrison watched the alien ships approach with satisfaction. "Right on schedule," he said quietly. "Sir?" Carter asked, not understanding what the captain meant. Morrison turned to Ensign Martinez at the communications station. "Bobby, Activate the minefield. Martinez's fingers flew across his controls. Minefield activated, Captain. All devices are armed and ready. Dr. Grant had been monitoring the alien fleet's approach, and she smiled as she realized what was about to happen. They're following their standard attack pattern, Captain, just like our intelligence predicted they would. The Zephyrian ships moved in a classic formation, one that had served them well for thousands of years. They had no way of knowing that. Human intelligence had studied their tactics for 3 years, learning every pattern and predicting every move. The first mine exploded as the lead alien ship passed within 50 meters of the hidden device. The kinetic explosive tore through the crystal hull, sending debris spinning in all directions. The ship behind it tried to change course but ran directly into a second mine. Admiral Kethvar watched in horror as his reformed fleet flew directly into a trap. The humans had not retreated at all. They had been herding his ships into a killing field. "Evasive action," he screamed, but it was too late. The mines had been placed with mathematical precision, accounting for every possible escape route. Ship after ship struck the hidden explosives, their hulls cracking open like fragile glass. "How did they know?" Kethvar whispered, watching his fleet die around him. "How could they predict our movements?" On the Defiant, Commander Johnson brought the railguns back online. The magnetic coils had cooled enough to resume firing, and there were still plenty of targets to choose from. "Mines have taken out 12 ships, Captain," Carter reported. 8 vessels remaining, all showing damage. Morrison stood up from his command chair and walked to the view screen. The space around them was filled with debris from destroyed alien ships, glittering in the starlight like a field of deadly diamonds. "Open a channel to the alien flagship," he ordered. Admiral Kethavar's face appeared on the screen, his features twisted with rage and fear. His ship's bridge was sparking from damage, and several of his officers were tending to wounded crew members. "You planned this," the alien admiral accused. "You knew exactly how we would attack." Morrison nodded. "We've been studying your empire for 3 years, Admiral. We know your tactics, your formations, your standard operating procedures. You've been using the same strategies for so long that you've become predictable." The human captain paused, letting his words sink in. "You see, while you've been ruling the galaxy through fear and superior technology, we've been learning, we've been adapting, we've been preparing for this day." Kethvar's anger was replaced by something Morrison recognized as desperation. "What do you want, human? What are your terms?" Morrison smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I want you to understand something, Admiral. This isn't about terms or surrender. This is about sending a message." The captain gestured to his crew around him, men and women who had trained for years for this moment. "Earth is not some primitive world you can conquer on a whim. We are not helpless prey waiting to be harvested. We are humanity, and we do not go quietly into the darkness." The railguns fired again, and another alien ship exploded in brilliant light. 7 ships remained of the once mighty Zephyrian fleet, and they all knew that the human vessel could destroy them whenever it chose to do so. Admiral Kethavar stared at the tactical display, watching his empire's reputation crumble along with his fleet. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Zephyrian Empire had met an enemy that could not be intimidated or easily defeated. The age of easy conquest was over, and it had ended at the hands of a species they had dismissed as primitive. The humans had taught them a lesson that would echo across the galaxy. Underestimate Earth at your own peril. The 7 remaining Zephyrian ships hung motionless in space, their crystal hulls scarred and blackened from the mine explosions. Admiral Kethvar knew his fleet was beaten, but he also knew that retreat was his only option. If word of this defeat reached other species in the galaxy, it could spark rebellions across the entire empire. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving emergency signals from the outer patrol ships. They're requesting permission to jump to hyperspace and return to the home fleet." Kethvar considered his options. His proud fleet had been reduced to a handful of damaged ships by a single human vessel. The smart thing to do would be to run, regroup, and return with overwhelming force. But first, he needed to make sure no word of this humiliation reached other worlds. "All ships, prepare for emergency hyperspace jump," he ordered. We retreat to Rally Point 7 and await reinforcements. On the Defiant, Lieutenant Carter detected the energy buildup in the alien ships. Captain, they're charging their hyperspace drives. It looks like they're trying to run. Morrison had expected this moment. The aliens were proud, but they were not stupid. They would want to escape and return with more ships. But Morrison could not allow that to happen. Earth needed time to prepare for the larger war that was sure to come. Dr. Grant, what do you see on your sensors? Morrison asked. The scientist studied her displays carefully. Their hyperspace drives are powering up, but the process takes time. I estimate 3 minutes before they can jump to faster than light speed. Morrison turned to his weapons officer. Pete, can you stop them before they escape? Commander Johnson checked his targeting computers. Yes, sir, but we'll need to act fast. Once they enter hyperspace, we won't be able to follow them. The captain made his decision quickly. Target their hyperspace drives. Disable them if possible. Destroy them if necessary. The railgun swiveled to new targets, focusing on the glowing energy cores that powered the alien ships' faster-than-light engines. These drives were more heavily protected than the rest of the ships, but they were also larger targets. Admiral Kethvar watched the human ship maneuver closer to his fleet. What are they doing? Why aren't they letting us retreat? His tactical officer's voice was filled with panic. Sir, they're targeting our hyperspace drives. If they disable those systems, we'll be trapped here. The first tungsten round struck the flagship's hyperspace core, sending sparks and debris flying across the engine section. The carefully balanced energy field that allowed faster-than-light travel collapsed instantly, leaving the ship stranded in normal space. Hyperspace drive is down, the engineering officer reported. We're dead in space, Admiral. Kethvar felt the last of his hopes crumble. Without hyperspace capability, his ships were trapped in this system. The humans could destroy them at will, or worse, they could be captured and interrogated. The other alien ships tried to scatter, hoping to get far enough away to complete their hyperspace jumps. But the Defiant's railguns were too accurate and too fast. One by one, the escape drives were destroyed, leaving the entire surviving fleet stranded. Captain Morrison opened a communication channel to the alien flagship. Admiral Kethavar's face appeared on the screen, his features showing defeat and something that might have been fear. Admiral, Morrison said calmly, I believe we need to have a serious conversation. The alien commander straightened in his chair, trying to maintain some dignity despite his desperate situation. What do you want, human? You have won this battle, but the Empire will send more ships. Hundreds of them. Thousands if necessary. Morrison nodded. I'm sure they will. But first, they need to know what happened here. And that's where you come in. Dr. Grant had been monitoring the alien communication systems, and she looked up from her station with concern. Captain, I'm detecting incoming signals from the edge of the system. It looks like more Zephyrian ships are approaching. Morrison felt his blood run cold. How many? At least 50 ships, sir. They're still several hours away, but they're definitely heading in our direction. Commander Johnson checked his ammunition count. Captain, we have about 100 rounds left. That's not enough to fight 50 fresh ships. The situation had just become much more complicated. Morrison had planned for the possibility of reinforcements, but not this many, and not this soon. The Defiant was a powerful ship, but it had limits. Admiral Kethvar, Morrison said, his voice taking on a harder edge. It seems your friends are coming to rescue you. That changes things. The alien commander's expression shifted to show surprise. You did not know about the second fleet? Morrison realized he had made an error. The aliens had been more prepared than Earth's intelligence had suggested, but he could not show weakness now, not when the stakes were so high. It doesn't matter, Morrison replied. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to send a message to that incoming fleet. You're going to tell them to stay away from Earth's solar system. Kethvar laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. Why would I do that? In a few hours, your single ship will be destroyed and your world will be ours. Morrison smiled, but his eyes were cold. Because, Admiral, you're going to be my insurance policy. The human captain turned to his crew. Chief Walsh, prepare the boarding pods. Dr. Grant, I need you to analyze the alien ship's docking systems. Lieutenant Carter, target the remaining ship's weapon systems, but do not fire unless I give the order. Kethvar watched the human preparations with growing alarm. You cannot seriously be planning to board our ships. Our hull metals are toxic to most species. You will die if you attempt to enter our vessels. Dr. Grant looked up from her analysis. Actually, sir, our environmental suits should protect us from their hull materials. The toxic compounds they use are dangerous to organic tissue, but not to our synthetic materials. Morrison had studied the intelligence reports on Zephyrian technology for months. Their ships were designed to be deadly to most alien species, but humanity had developed countermeasures. It was another example of the aliens' overconfidence working against them. Prepare boarding party Alpha, Morrison ordered. Full environmental, gear, standard weapons loadout. Commander Johnson assembled a team of 12 Marines, all trained in zero-gravity combat, and equipped with kinetic weapons that would work inside the alien ships. They had practiced this operation dozens of times in simulation, but this would be their first real test. Admiral Kethvar realized that the humans were serious about boarding his ships. This is madness. You cannot control 7 ships with your small crew. Morrison looked at the alien commander with something that might have been pity. Admiral, you still don't understand. We're not trying to control your ships. We're going to use them to send a message to your reinforcements. The boarding pods launched from the Defiant, small armored vehicles that attached themselves to the hulls of the Zephyrian ships. The human Marines cut through the alien hull plating with plasma torches, creating entry points that led directly to the ship's command centers. The Zephyrian crews put up little resistance. They were scientists and engineers, not soldiers, and their energy weapons were useless in the close confines of their own ships. The human kinetic weapons, designed for infantry combat, were devastatingly effective. Within an hour, all 7 alien ships were under human control. Admiral Kethvar found himself face to face with Captain Morrison in his own command center, surrounded by armed human Marines. Now, Admiral, Morrison said, let's discuss that message you're going to send to your fleet. Admiral Kethvar sat in his own command chair, but now human Marines stood behind him with their weapons ready. Captain Morrison had taken position next to the alien communication console, while Dr. Grant worked to understand the Zephyrian technology. The incoming fleet will be here in 2 hours, Morrison said, checking the tactical display. That gives us enough time to prepare our message. Kethvar's crystalline features showed his confusion. What message could you possibly send that would make any difference? Fleet Commander Vorlash has 60 ships under his command. He will not be intimidated by your tricks. Morrison smiled and turned to Dr. Grant. Lisa, have you figured out how to work their communication system? The scientist nodded, her hands moving across the alien controls with growing confidence. Yes, Captain. Their system is actually quite simple once you understand the basic principles. I can broadcast on all Zephyrian military frequencies. Commander Johnson entered the alien bridge, his environmental suit making him look like a mechanical giant among the slender Zephyrians. Captain, all 7 ships are secure. The alien crews are confined to their quarters, and our people have control of all major systems. Morrison had spent the last hour studying the alien ship layouts and capabilities. The Zephyrian vessels were beautiful, but they were also fragile. Their crystal hulls were designed more for appearance than for combat durability. It was another sign of how long the Empire had gone without facing real opposition. Pete, can we use their weapon systems? Morrison asked. Johnson shook his head. Their energy weapons are too different from our technology, sir, but we don't need their guns. We have something better. The human commander had been working with the ship's engineers to modify the alien vessels. The Zephyrian ships had powerful engines and sophisticated sensors, but their weapon systems were useless against an enemy that could return fire effectively. Sir, Lieutenant Carter's voice came through Morrison's communicator. The alien reinforcement fleet is changing course. They're moving faster now, probably responding to the silence from Admiral Kethvar's ships. Morrison had expected this. The incoming fleet commander would be suspicious when his advance force stopped reporting. Fleet Commander Vorlash would assume the worst and prepare for a major battle. Admiral, Morrison said, turning back to Kethvar. It's time for you to make that call. The alien commander's black eyes showed his hatred, but also his fear. I will not help you destroy more of my people. Morrison's expression hardened. You're going to help me save them, Admiral. The question is whether you want them to live or die. Dr. Grant looked up from the communication console. Captain, I'm reading the incoming fleet's formation. They're arranged for a standard planetary assault. They're planning to attack Earth directly. This was exactly what Morrison had feared. If the aliens reached Earth's solar system, they could bombard the planet from orbit. Humanity's ground-based defenses were strong, but they could not protect against an attack from space. Admiral Kethvar, Morrison said, his voice cold and determined. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to contact Fleet Commander Vorlash and tell him that your mission was successful. You're going to report that Earth has surrendered and that no military action is needed. Kethvar laughed bitterly. He will never believe such a lie. Vorlash knows that primitive species always resist. He will demand proof of your surrender. Morrison nodded. Then we'll give him proof. The human captain had been preparing for this moment since the battle began. He understood that the aliens expected certain things from their conquered enemies. They expected fear, submission, and complete defeat. Dr. Grant, begin broadcasting on all frequencies. I want every ship in this system to hear what I'm about to say. The scientist activated the communication array, sending Morrison's signal across space to both the approaching fleet and any other vessels that might be listening. This is Captain Jake Morrison, of the United Earth ship Defiant, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the void. I am speaking to Fleet Commander Vorlash and all ships of the Zephyrian Reinforcement Fleet. On the bridge of his flagship, Fleet Commander Vorlash stared at the communication display in shock. A human was speaking directly to his fleet using Zephyrian military frequencies. How was this possible? Morrison continued his broadcast. Your advance fleet under Admiral Kethvar has been destroyed. 7 ships remain under my control, along with their crews. You have one choice to make, Commander. Turn around and leave this system, or share the same fate as the rest of your fleet. Vorlash felt his anger rising. Impossible. No primitive species could defeat 47 Zephyrian warships. But even as he spoke, his sensors were confirming the humans' claims. 7 ships that should have been reporting victory were instead broadcasting surrender codes. The advance fleet was gone. Morrison's voice continued across the communication channel. Commander Vorlash, I know you're listening. I know you think you can succeed where Admiral Kethvar failed, but I want you to understand something important. The human captain paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. Your empire has ruled this galaxy for 3,000 years by convincing other species that you are invincible, but you're not. You're just another group of bullies who have never faced real opposition. Dr. Grant monitored the incoming fleet's communications as they tried to make sense of what they were hearing. The Zephyrian crews were confused and frightened. They had never heard of a single ship destroying an entire fleet. Your advance fleet made the same mistake your empire has been making for centuries, Morrison continued. You assumed that different meant inferior. You saw our technology and dismissed it as primitive. You saw our weapons and thought they were harmless. Admiral Kethvar watched Morrison with something that might have been respect. The human was taking an enormous risk by challenging the entire Zephyrian fleet, but he was doing it with absolute confidence. But here's what you failed to understand, Morrison said, his voice growing stronger. Humanity didn't choose to be different. We were forced to innovate. While your empire grew fat and lazy on easy conquests, we spent centuries fighting each other. We learned that survival means adaptation. We learned that the best weapon is often the one your enemy doesn't expect. Fleet Commander Vorlash found himself listening despite his anger. The human spoke with the confidence of someone who had already won, not someone facing overwhelming odds. Morrison delivered his final message with calm certainty. So here's what's going to happen, Commander. You're going to take your 60 ships and return to your homeworlds. You're going to report that Earth is under the protection of humanity, and that any Zephyrian vessel that enters our system will be destroyed. The communication channel fell silent for a long moment. Then Morrison's voice returned, harder than before. "And if you decide to test our resolve, Commander, remember this. Today, one human ship destroyed 40 ships of your advanced fleet. Tomorrow, if you force us to build a real navy, we might not be content to simply defend our home." Fleet Commander Vorlash stared at his tactical display, seeing 60 ships under his command. 60 ships against one human vessel. The odds were overwhelmingly in his favor. But 47 ships had been overwhelmingly in Admiral Kethvar's favor as well. After a long moment, Vorlash gave the order that would echo across the galaxy. "All ships reverse course. We return to the home fleet." As the Zephyrian reinforcement fleet turned away from Earth's solar system, Morrison allowed himself a small smile. Humanity had bought itself time, and time was all they needed. The galaxy was about to learn that Earth was no longer a helpless world waiting to be conquered. The age of human expansion was about to begin, and it would start with a single ship that had refused to surrender. The Defiant had lived up to its name, and, in doing so, had changed the course of galactic history forever.